On this episode of RevHang, Ben and I talk about the IndyCar race in St. Louis and the Formula One Dutch Grand Prix. Let's do it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to RevHang. I'm Nathan, and alongside me virtually is my good friend and co-host, Ben Bagley. How you doing, Ben?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good. I got to do some playing around in the dirt with the sprinklers today, and I just got back from Redmond, floating the river.
Nice. Sounds like a pretty fun weekend. I spent my weekend up in the capital city of Salem with my lovely lady, and we went to the dirt track car races in Lebanon.
The only good
Uh,
reason to go to that area of Oregon.
yes, yeah. There's not much racing in Oregon, period. So it's few and far between. But every Saturday during the summertime, we do have races in Lebanon at Willamette Speedway, and they are very fun to watch. This time around, it was a 100-lap feature race with the IMCA modified cars, which are probably my favorite dirt cars.
They're pretty cool.
So that was a lot of fun to go see. But anyway, we've got a couple of races to go over in IndyCar and Formula One outside of the dirt track spectrum, which is a much smaller scene. uh, so let's just jump right in with the Bommarito Automotive Group 500 at Worldwide Technology Raceway in St. Louis. Going through the top 10 in qualifying to give you some context, it was Joseph Newgarden, Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward, Felix Rosenqvist, Roman Grosjean, David Malukas, Alexander Rossi, Will Power, Callum Ilott, and Scott McLaughlin. Going into the race, Newgarden led the first half in dominating fashion. On the first lap, Peterson got spun out by Ed Carpenter, and that brought out a caution. Dixon saved a ton of fuel in the first, in really all of his stints, cutting out 2 pit stops compared to the rest of the field, which really helped him out later. On lap 108, O'Ward challenged Newgarden for the lead, but Newgarden held and was able to get around lap traffic and create a barrier for himself. 15 laps later, Takuma Sato hit the wall and spun out, bringing out a caution. About 13 laps after that, Newgarden and O'Ward banged wheels a couple of times on the restart, fighting for P2 behind Scott Dixon. And then on lap 211, Newgarden was coming out of the pits, got stuck in lap traffic, and hit the wall after he got into the marbles, getting too high up on the track, and that took him out of the race for a good 20-30 laps. The race finished with Dixon, O'Ward, and Malukas on the podium. 4th and 5th were Rossi and McLaughlin. 6 through 10 was Herta, Palou, Rosenqvist, Power, and Ericsson. 11 through 15 was VK, Grosjean, Ferrucci, Hunter Ray, and Kirkwood. 16 through 20 was Daly, Lundgaard, Lundqvist, DeFrancesco, and Rahal. 21 through 25 was Stingray Robb, Canapino, Castro Neves, Ed Carpenter, and Joseph Newgarden. And then our DNFs were Takuma Sato, Callum Ilott, and Benjamin Peterson. Pretty good race for an oval race. St. Louis is a very interesting track.
Yeah, it's really oddly shaped, very acute.
Yeah, you got a really tight turn in turn 1 and 2, and then a really, really wide turn in turn 3 and 4. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Always leads to some interesting stuff. They did have alternate tires for the oval race, and they have never done that before, so every team was required to run a set of alternates at least once during the race. And to no one's surprise, the alternates were by far the worst tire to be on.
Yeah,
So most
that's
teams
nothing
just
new.
did as short a stint as they could, and then got back onto the primaries for the rest of the time.
Yeah, my favorite part of the race, I gotta say, was watching Colton Herta try to harass Palou over and over again. Watching him
Yeah,
try to shove him out in the pit lane was
yeah,
super entertaining. I was like, "What are you doing, man? What do you think your job is here?"
yeah. There was some scrappiness going on throughout this race between Herta and Palou, and Award and Newgarden. People were not afraid to make some contact, which is always entertaining and fun to watch. But not a lot of DNFs. With all that being said, and most of the DNFs that did happen were self-inflicted. So
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing too malicious. There was in practice an incident where Scott McLaughlin spun out in the infield, which distracted Will Power, caused him to go wide, and then he went into the wall, speared down across the track again, and took out Marcus Ericsson. And it should be noted that Marcus Ericsson did not have a backup chassis after I think his teammate took his backup chassis during the Indy 500 weekend. So Ericsson had to take somebody else's backup chassis. I'm not entirely sure whose car it was, but it was an American Legion livery, and it looked very odd.
Yeah.
It was a mix of Ericsson's normal livery and that blue American Legion livery on the tub, but they just used the American Legion tub, put red and white stickers for his number on the side, and then used the same front wing that Ericsson would normally use. So it was a very odd looking livery, but it also kind of worked. It kind of looks like the Alpha Tauris a little bit.
Yeah, I kept on thinking it was a Grand Murray Hull or something whenever I saw it.
Yeah, it was a little odd, but it kind of worked. But I'm just glad he got to race and they figured something out. Because that accident in practice was definitely not his fault.
Yeah. Yeah, but aside from that, it was pretty clean. It was just kind of a nice entry-level circle race.
Yeah, for sure. So as a result of this race, Justin Newgarden is now out of the championship picture. He can no longer win. Dixon is now the only challenger to Palou in that aspect. With that being said, a top 10 in Portland pretty much guarantees Palou the championship. I think he only has to beat Dixon by he has to be ahead by 50 points after Portland. 50 some odd, 52 maybe, 53. After Portland to win the championship, and I think he's 70 points ahead of Dixon right now, or somewhere in that neighborhood. So he basically just has to come within 20 points of Scott Dixon to clinch the championship, which shouldn't be very difficult.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see that race in Portland this weekend.
Yeah, you're good to go to that, which I'm very jealous, but also happy for you. So
I'll take lots of videos for you.
Amazing, I love it.
People love that, right?
Yeah.
Same as the concert videos.
Yeah, well, yeah. So as long as your Snapchat story isn't 30 minutes long, I don't think it'll be a problem.
It's bro, I saw the race.
Right.
Watched it on TV.
So also in that race, David Malukas drove very well. He qualified well in P6, and he also managed to convert it to a podium in P3. So very good to see from him. He hasn't had the greatest of seasons this year, but it's not been horrible. So it is nice to see him have a good result.
Yeah.
Going quickly through the standings, not much has changed other than Scott Dixon has pulled away from Newgarden now in second place. Palou is still very much ahead, like we talked about. O'Ward could challenge Newgarden for P3 in the championship for sure, and so could McLaughlin. Past that, everything's pretty much locked in unless somebody further back wins the next race. But yeah, so it's kind of the same as it has been. Moving into our paddock news section out of IndyCar. Still in IndyCar actually. Marcus Ericsson is moving to Andretti next season, leaving Chip Ganassi Racing. Interesting news there. Chip Ganassi and Andretti, I would say, are pretty equal in terms of the skill and status and abilities of the teams.
Yeah, I would say Chip Ganassi, at least with Palou and Dixon, they seem so dialed in right now, and Andretti has definitely not been as on top of it. I mean, they've had some some good races, but especially with some of their pit strategies mid-season, like, I don't know. I was really liking Chip Ganassi, and they felt like they were kind of on a steamroll.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Andretti's kind of fallen off the last couple of years, but I think that's more due to drivers than anything else. It's hard to say. I would say Kirkwood has been on the up and up for sure. He's won a couple races this year.
That is true.
Grosjean has had just a heck of a time. I don't know if he'll keep his seat. If he does, I think I'll be pretty surprised. But if he does, then next year is definitely it for him. He needs to start winning. After that, let's see.
Herta either has bad pit strategy or unfortunate
bad luck in general.
Bad luck or bad times of aggression, or it's always something.
Herta's had some really good races this year that have been foiled by just bad luck in general. So
yeah,
I don't think you can really blame Herta. I think honestly he would have won maybe 2 or 3 races by now if it wasn't for some bad pit stops. So Herta's, I think, looking the best of all the Andretti drivers right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And then De Francesco. Right, Ericsson's getting there. We don't know officially who he's replacing yet. I would wager it's probably De Francesco. But I am not 100% sure. I don't think it has been officially announced. But that will be a story to watch more in the IndyCar silly season, which should start kicking off here pretty soon. Speaking of silly seasons, in the Formula 1 silly season, Hülkenberg and Magnussen have been confirmed at Haas for next year. This is kind of the first driver news that we have this season. And, well, go ahead, Ben.
I was right. I was so right. And you were wrong. I was right.
Yeah.
I called it.
Yes. You did. Good job. I thought Porsche might have a shot at that seat, but apparently not. So I applaud you, sir. Good job on calling it exactly. I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure of anything anymore.
Well, at least you can probably be sure that my AlphaTauri prediction isn't going to come correct. But after this weekend, I don't know. The conspiracy theorist Ben is coming out. Lawson driving for AlphaTauri already.
Yes.
It sounds a lot like what I was saying.
Well, yes.
But it's for the wrong driver.
There are. Yeah. So speaking of which, Daniel Ricciardo broke his wrist in FP1 this week in the Netherlands. So he was replaced by Liam Lawson for the rest of the weekend, and I would wager probably next week in Italy as well. Depending on how long Ricciardo's recovery takes, possibly even Singapore and beyond, but that's too far out to know. It should be noted that Lance Stroll drove his Aston Martin this year after breaking his wrist and only recovering for 18 days. So,
that's a good point.
Ricciardo, I would say, is probably going to want to tough it out and be back in the car by Singapore. However, Singapore is a very, very physically demanding race, so maybe not. But we will see. I would say probably United States at the latest, or is it Japan before then? I think US is. What's after Singapore? Let me go to RevHang.com and check the race calendar.
Yeah, it's a good thing there's a website that Nathan built where you can find all the stuff out super easily.
Yeah, there is a website that I built where, like Ben said, you can find this stuff out super easily.
And it's a really short URL.
Yes. Yep. www.revhang.com will get you where you need to go. Looks like in September after Singapore is Japan, and then Qatar, and then the US.
Oh, Qatar. I forgot about Qatar.
Right. Qatar is not too difficult of a track in terms of physicality. Singapore and Japan are, but I would be surprised if Ricciardo is not back by Japan. So I'd say Qatar at the latest, but more than likely Singapore or Japan is when Ricciardo will be back. He's going to want to get back in the car as soon as possible, because if he's out too long, then he might not get renewed for next season at AlphaTauri, depending on how Lawson does. So he's going to want to get back in to protect his seat as much as he can.
Yeah. He's got to prove himself a little longer against Tsunoda to make sure, just to feel safe.
For sure. But yes, conspiracy theory Ben has his tinfoil hat on right now. Lawson, while he is filling in for Ricciardo, and that does look a certain way, I still think that he is not. I'm still very much inclined to believe that Palou is in the running more for that seat next year.
Which
obviously,
I would rather that be true.
Yeah, I would say it's still more likely, and the only reason they didn't have Palou fill in for Ricciardo this week was because Palou has a race today. And he's not just gonna go, oh, well, I don't really need the IndyCar Championship, just to go race one or two races.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch Max Verstappen win in Zandvoort in the rain.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get last place more than likely, and give up my IndyCar Championship. It seems like not the right decision for him. So, anyway, but Lawson is the next step, I would say. If Palou does not get the seat, I am pretty much 1,000% sure that Lawson will. So yeah, that's kind of where that sits. Moving into Formula One and the Dutch Grand Prix. Let's go through the top 10 in qualifying. It was Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Albon, Alonso, Sainz, Perez, Piastri, Leclerc, and Sargent in 10th place. Sargent getting into Q3 for the first time this season.
Finally.
Yeah, took him a while. So going into the race, Verstappen took the lead out of turn 1. The rain started on the first lap, and a quarter of the drivers pitted for inters, including Perez. It then started to rain even harder on lap 2, forcing most of the rest of the drivers to pit, not all of them. Some of them decided to brave it out for the 3 or 4 laps that it did rain. Perez quickly gained the lead of the race on lap 3, passing Verstappen in the pits. Verstappen then quickly made his way back through the field after his pit stop, very quickly. He was just... It's so clear to see that Verstappen's in an absolute league of his own. And when he's forced to try and actually put effort in, he's just so much better than everybody else.
Yeah, watching him at the end of the race on the radio, he's like, they gave us a difficult time, or they gave us a hard time, or something like that. Like, no, they didn't.
Yeah, not really. It was harder than normal. He had to actually focus for about 10 laps of the race. But anyway, the drivers who came in for inters started to come in for slicks again by lap 11 after the rain stopped. Verstappen was able to pull off an undercut on Perez, and that was completely orchestrated by the team, so there's some spiciness there, which I'm sure Perez was not too happy about. Logan Sargent hit the wall and brought out a safety car on lap 16. The rain, then after that, it wasn't too much action. It was Verstappen driving off into the sunset, and Perez recovering from his poor pit strategy until lap 62, when the rain started to come down again, forcing drivers into the pits. By the next lap, the rain was extremely heavy, and a lot of the drivers went off the track, including Perez. I think, Leclerc was one of them. Who else? Zhou, Tsunoda, bunch of people spun off the track.
Yeah.
On lap 64... What's up?
Oh, keep going. Sorry.
On lap 64, Zhou hit the wall very hard out of turn 1 and brought out a red flag for 40 minutes, partially because they had to repair the barriers, and partially because it was raining so hard. And this was right as all the drivers were starting to pit for wet tires. On the restart, Alonso challenged Verstappen for a couple of laps, but soon fell behind by a few seconds. Perez got a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. and Gasly was able to stay within 5 seconds of Perez to take P3. So, going into the results, Max Verstappen won the race, followed by Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly on the podium. First podium for Gasly in quite a while. Fourth and fifth were Perez and Sainz. 6 through 10 was Hamilton, Norris, Albon, Piastri, and Ocon. 11 through 15 was Stroll, Hülkenberg, Lawson, Bottas, and Tsunoda. 16 was Magnussen, and then our DNFs were Russell, Zhou, Leclerc, and Sargent. Russell and Leclerc had mechanical failures, and Zhou had obviously a massive accident, and Sargent did as well.
I think this was the right amount of rain for a race.
Yeah, it was pretty perfect. It was a very good race. If you're introducing someone to Formula One and you want to show them a one-off race, this would be one I would add to that list, along with like Germany 2019. In terms of races with mixed conditions, rain and dry, but not too much of one or the other, not too many red flags. I would say definitely a good one to show people. As a result of this race, Verstappen equaled Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 wins in a row, which is pretty bonkers.
I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon either.
Well, I don't think so.
No?
I mean, it can't last forever, but yeah.
Well, at least for this season, I guess. I should amend.
I thought for sure after all of the chaos on the first lap, I was like, "Oh, this is it. Verstappen's not going to equal the record." But then he just kept getting to the front, even after all the setbacks. So, yeah, it's hard to say. Anything could happen. He could have an engine failure, and that would be it. He could get tagged by somebody into a turn one. We all know from Gran Turismo and other games that Monza turn one is very exciting sometimes. But these guys are professionals, so it's not usually quite as exciting.
Yeah, and you're not racing against computers with no regard for personal safety.
Right. But yeah, anything could happen. It just takes one incident to take Max out of a race. I will say I do kind of want to see him win Monza at the very least to break the record.
Yeah, I just want to see how far he can go.
Yeah, but once he breaks the record, then at that point, then I don't really care.
Take him out.
If it doesn't, take him out. I don't really care after that how long it goes. I honestly kind of hope it doesn't go too long so that we never see the record broken again. But at the same time, like, yeah, it would be pretty crazy if he ended up winning like 20 races in a row or something like that.
Yep.
So who knows? I will say I do kind of want him to. Break the. Well, he's definitely going to break the record for most wins in a season. His own record that he holds. But I also want to see him break the record for the highest win percentage in a season.
Yeah.
Which is like 92% or something like that. And I think if he wins out, I think he has to win all but one of the races to do that. I think that record is, I think Alberto Ascari owns that record from like the 60s, 50s or 60s. So that would be a pretty crazy accomplishment with when races, there were like 10 races a season back then, and now there's 24. And so that would be a pretty nuts.
It was a very different sport back then.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But anyway, Perez had some trouble this weekend with pit strategy, pit stops in general. The last pit stop that he got stuck in the pit lane because the red flag came out before he could get out of the pit lane, and so the pit lane closed. So he was going to go a lap down, but because of how things all worked out, he ended up starting P3 after the red flag again, so that didn't really affect him too much.
Yeah, I was really worried about that.
Yeah, I was like, if he goes a lap down because of that, that'd be crazy. But anyway, Mercedes had a rough weekend too, with Hamilton qualifying in 13th. And Russell did qualify 3rd, but then he did not have a very good race after that. Hamilton did have a pretty good race. He finished 6th from 13th. And after all that craziness, I would say that was pretty good. But definitely not a smooth weekend. Rain pretty much shook everything up. Alex Albon looks pretty strong for most of the weekend. He finished 8th in this race, which I think might be his highest finish of the season. Not 100% sure, but he did bring back some solid points for Williams, putting them officially ahead of Haas instead of tied with them. So good stuff from Albon. I would say Sargent had a good weekend, but it didn't really go his way.
Promising weekend.
He showed
potential
some potential. Yes. Unfortunately, he did crash out twice over the course of the weekend. So
yeah,
any positives that the team took from that in terms of re-signing him were probably canceled out.
Well, I did see that the team's pretty much standing behind him on the crash, at least during the race. It looked like there was some hydraulic problem with the steering or something that caused him to not be able to keep it on the track. So at least there's that, and it sounds like he's definitely going to be there for at least another year.
Solid. Well, good stuff. And then Liam Lawson also, I'd say, had a pretty good weekend for his debut. He did qualify last, however, he did finish 13th in the race, ahead of 3 finishers, Bottas, Tsunoda, and Magnussen, which, for your first weekend, I'd say is pretty good.
Yeah, out finishing your teammate, especially?
Yeah, for sure. So, good stuff from Lawson. Not quite the crazy debut that we saw from Dave De Vries last year, but I think that was due to De Vries being in a Williams at the easiest track on the calendar, and the Williams being a rocket ship in a straight line. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go through the standings real quick. If we even need to, not much has changed. Alonso's now in P3, I think, past Lewis after this race. Yeah. So Alonso takes P3 in the drivers. Sainz and Leclerc are now tied for Ferrari at 5 and 6. Past that, nothing too interesting. Had to add another row for Liam Lawson. It seemed like every week I'm adding new rows to the spreadsheet.
I was so confused there for a little bit. I scrolled too far and went down to the pit stop championship, and I was like, what the shit? What's Perez doing? Doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. So, and then in teams, like Constructors' Championship, nothing's really changed at all. So, moving on to the Pit Stop Championship, it was Verstappen on top with a 2.01 second pit stop this week, followed by Piastri and Norris with the exact same fastest pit stop at 2.27 seconds. And then Ocon and Lawson both also had the exact... Oh my goodness. Looking down the list. Ocon and Lawson had the exact same time at 2.43 seconds for 4th and 5th. Stroll and Perez had the exact same time at 2.46 seconds.
Wow.
For 6th and 7th. And then Gasly and Tsunoda were almost exactly the same, but not quite. So Gasly was 8th, Tsunoda was 9th, and Bottas was 10th. And then we do have 2 more duplicates at the bottom. Both Haas's had 3.35 as their best pit stop. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder if their stopwatch was a little messed up, but anyway. Standings for the Pit Stop Championship. Again, nothing much has changed. Still very much Perez out front, followed by Leclerc and Verstappen. Mercedes not doing too well in the constructors compared to how they have been in the past. Even AlphaTauri is starting to drop off a little bit. Moving on to the overtake of the week. I gave this one to Lewis Hamilton for his overtake on Yuki Tsunoda on lap 55 of the Dutch Grand Prix. This was into turn 1. It was very, very nice to watch. It was Hamilton going around the outside of Tsunoda into that banked turn 1. When they turned in, Hamilton was completely behind Tsunoda, and when they came out of the corner, Hamilton was completely ahead of Tsunoda. He just drove way faster around the outside. It was pretty crazy to watch. So that was my overtake of the week. There wasn't anything too spectacular other than that this week, so that was what took the spot. Moving into our prediction segment, which is always fun to talk about. St. Louis and Gateway and the Bommarito Automotive Group 500, all the names that this race has. Let's start with pole position. What did you have, Ben?
Oh boy, I had Ericsson,
and I had Rosenqvist, neither of which were
yeah,
good.
It was Newgarden. We should have known. That was our bad.
It was Newgarden, yeah, on pole. And then going into the podium, what did you have on your podium, Ben?
I got slaughtered this week. I had Newgarden, Ericsson, and Power.
Yeah, and I had Newgarden, O'Ward, and Power. I did get O'Ward correct, but Newgarden and Power were not on the podium. So both of us missed on those two. And then winning number of pit stops.
There were 3, and I had 4.
And I had 5, and 90% of the drivers had 5 pit stops. But then Scott Dixon comes along and cancels out 2 of his pit stops just because he's so good. So the winning number of pit stops was 3. He was, I think, the only driver with 3 pit stops, and he won the race. Yeah, pretty nuts. So moving on to the Dutch Grand Prix. Let's remind everybody of our top 5. It was Verstappen, Alonso, Gasly, Perez, and Sainz. What did you have, Ben?
Well, I had Verstappen free bingo space, and then I had Perez, Hamilton, Norris, and Russell, and then I had Albon as my dark horse. He actually did okay, but not quite podium finish.
Yeah, Albon did do very well this week. Qualified P4. Pretty nuts. I had Verstappen and Alonso and Norris, Hamilton, and Perez. And then Bottas was my dark horse. So I got Verstappen and Alonso correct.
That was a good call on Alonso.
Yeah, I thought the Aston Martin might be pretty good this weekend. So, yep, I got Verstappen and Alonso, but the rest wrong. I don't know what I was thinking with my Bottas dark horse. But anyway, fastest lap went to Fernando Alonso. Both of us said Verstappen, so both of us whiffed there on the semi-free bingo space. Usually it's Verstappen, but sometimes it's not. And then driver of the day went to Fernando Alonso. What'd you have?
Yeah, I had Verstappen.
And I, once again, nailed it with Alonso. Alonso coming in the clutch for me this week.
Yeah. Yeah, top-tier fantasy driver this week.
For sure. I need to check my F1 fantasy. I haven't checked it in like 3 months.
It's been a long time.
Maybe we should do a segment on that next week or next season.
Yeah,
we'll just have an F1 fantasy section. That'd be fun. Oh, I see you're catching up on stuff.
Oh no, I didn't put anything in.
Okay, we will be right back after these messages. All right, we have returned with our predictions for the coming week in motorsports, starting with IndyCar and the Grand Prix of Portland, which Ben will be attending, and I'm sure taking notes on his predictions.
I will.
Isn't that right, Ben?
100% remember to do that in between the Jack and Cokes and the slices of pizza.
Fair enough. Good things to have in Portland.
Whiskey's the best way to stay hydrated when you're out in the sun all day.
Of course, because it's not like it's been hot and the air quality's been bad in Oregon as of late, or anything like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, pole position. What do you have for me, Ben?
I have Power on pole position. I watched him last year and he killed it, so I'm excited to see him this year.
Okay, and I have Alex Palou on pole. Who's your podium gonna be?
My podium, in no particular order, I have Newgarden, Power, and Palou. Power trio.
Awesome. And my podium is going to be Palou, Award, and Lundgaard. So, yeah, winning pit stops. What do you have?
I have 3 pit stops. I honestly don't remember how many there were last year, but something like a good round number.
Okay, and I have 2 because, yeah, same reason, but I chose 2 instead.
2, but with a safety car, essentially. So maybe a
sure.
Who knows?
We'll see. All right, Formula 1 Italian Grand Prix, top 5. What do you got, Ben?
We got Verstappen, we got Perez, Norris, Sainz, and Piastri. Shoot. And I have Hülkenberg as my dark horse.
Beautiful. I have Verstappen, free bingo space, followed by Perez, Norris, Albon, and Piastri, and my dark horse is Logan Sargent.
Wow, you're really betting on that straight line speed in the Williams, huh?
I am. That's entirely the reason for the Albon.
All in, baby.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've got Williams doing very well next week. Hopefully that is the case. I want to see Sargent score points before the end of the season, and
yeah.
I think this might be one of his last opportunities. So, that is my guess. Fastest lap, what do you got, Ben?
It's going to be Verstappen.
Yep, I am in agreement there, even though it wasn't last time.
Hey, that was the rain.
That was, sure.
We'll say that. Conspired against him.
All right. Yeah, and he still won.
Yeah.
So does that make Verstappen a god of his own? Anyway, driver of the day. What do you have?
I have Carlos Sainz, because if he gets 4th, like I'm predicting, and if he gets anywhere near the podium in Italy with the way Ferrari's been performing, he's going to be a hero.
Yeah, most likely. And I have Alex Albon for the same reason. So one of our 4th place predictions possibly gets driver of the day. All right, that rounds off our predictions for the coming week in motorsports. Ben has some words of wisdom for us, so why don't you get started, Ben?
Yep, I lied on the script. It's not actually about watering the lawn in the evening. It's actually about buying a CBRN mask. If you are able to, you should definitely have one for every member of your family. Not only because they're cool, but they also protect you from CBRN, chemical, biological. Shit, what does the R stand for again? Something that starts with an R and nuclear. I know this. Why can't I think of it now? I'll come up with it next podcaster. Oh yeah, wait. I don't know.
It's not radiation. That's not how that works.
No. I
don't know.
Anyways, they protect you from lots of stuff that the internet can tell you about more specifically. And I definitely recommend, they can be kind of expensive, it's like $300 for a decent mask. But I mean, if something bad happens, or even if it's like really smoky outside or something like that, you throw on your Apocalypse CBRN mask, not only do you look cool, you'll be breathing super well and laughing at all your friends who don't have them.
Awesome stuff, Ben.
You're welcome. This has been Pepper Ben, signing off.
Awesome. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode of RevHang. If you enjoyed it, leave a like or rating on the platform you listened on. It really helps us out. If you want to see updated standings for IndyCar and F1 or a calendar of upcoming races from all sorts of different series, check out our website, RevHang.com. If you have a question about racing or about us, hit us up on Twitter or X now using hashtag RevHangPodcast, and we may feature your question on the next show. You can also follow Ben on Instagram at BenjiMeetsWorld and myself at 2N_squared. We'll be back in a week to talk about the IndyCar Grand Prix of Portland and the Formula 1 Italian Grand Prix. That episode might be delayed due to scheduling, and Ben will be in Portland.
Partying up in Portland. Also, it's chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. I always try to lump radiological and nuclear into the same thing, but they're not the same thing.
Okay. Good stuff, Ben.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out, guys.
See ya.